foreign and security policy, and now has a policy on energy, a policy to fight climate change, and very, very recently, a policy to supervise the banking system at European Union level because of what happened just in the last 2 years with the collapse, almost collapse, near collapse of the financial system. And I think a number of conclusions can be drawn specifically about the development of the Union and about the development of the Parliament within it. And the first one I would draw about the development of the Union is this, that in its early days it was driven forward. The agenda was set and the development was driven by national leaders and latterly European leaders like Jacques Delors, who had a kind of fervent federalist spirit. In other words, who, many of them had direct experience of the war. They wanted to build a united Europe, a federalist Europe, and they drove it forward as far as they could. But once we moved into a generation where people had not had direct experience of the war, where ideas were changing, a new situation, particularly after 1989 and the fall of the Berlin Wall, well, things changed, and that federalist drive has since then gradually dissipated. And you've now got federalists sitting around in small groups of people feeling very, very sorry for themselves and wondering what happened because they say everything's gone wrong. I did a meeting of the European movement not very long ago, at which both the chairman and the president were saying, oh, Europe has completely lost its way. I don't believe it has at all. I just think that the development is being driven from a different area, from a different point. The development now is being driven from the outside. What's happening is that the process of European integration is just as fast as it ever has been, but it's being driven by developments in the outside world which are pushing our national leaders together into doing more and more together. Two big examples of this. One of them I was directly involved in because when I was chairman of the Justice and Home Affairs Committee, we had the terrorist attacks on New York. And a report which I had written in Parliament, as you know, the European Parliament has no right of initiative, but we can do things called initiative reports. And I had done an initiative report through my committee on what the European Union really needed to be doing to protect itself against the terrorist threat. And that report was voted on the floor of the House on the 6th of September 2001. And it would still be sitting on a shelf gathering dust if it hadn't been for the events of 5 days later. Suddenly the governments turned around and said, crumbs, we've got to do something about this. And within 4 months, all of the major recommendations of my report were law. And if you read the letters columns of the Western Morning News, you will find me being attacked week in, week out, day in, day out by the United Kingdom Independence Party for having fundamentally subverted liberties with the European arrest warrant. We can talk about it if you like. I bow to nobody in my respect for civil liberties. It is the only effective tool we have in fighting cross-border crime. And the second example of how Europe has been driven together is the one I've just given you. What we've done to get a handle on autonomy at a time when speculators can have a go at your currency in the way they have just done with Ireland, and how we better regulate the banks to make sure we don't go through another Lehman Brothers 2007, etc., with the collapse of Northern Rock and the loss of many people's savings and all of the other things that happened. But I am sure you would spot the difference if you had gone to any of our presidents and prime ministers 10 years ago and put to them the question, why is your country a member of the European Union? And they would have replied, well, they'd either have said, we're a member of the European Union because it's given us the longest unbroken period of peace that we've known in the history of our continent, or they would have said, or perhaps and they would have said, the explosion of trade, which has come about as a result of the European single market, has given us levels of prosperity that our grandparents and even our parents could never have dreamt of. But if you were, I wager, if you were to go to any of the heads of state or government now and put the same question, they'd say, we're in the European Union because the big challenges that we face, the challenge of climate change and energy security, the challenge of dealing with internationally organized crime linked to terrorism, the challenge of rapid world population growth and higher levels of migratory pressures than we've seen in generations, coupled with a decline in our own populations in Western Europe. These are challenges that no country can deal with on its own. And even though the European Union may not be the full answer, it is the best tool that we have for dealing with those challenges. So you've seen a fundamental change in the way the member states see the European Union. And at the same time, you've seen a fundamental change in the way the European Parliament sees the European Union. When I was elected in 1994, 80% of the members were politicians who had served long and sometimes honourable careers in national politics and had been put into a comfortable retirement home called the European Parliament. They've been put out to grass, if you like. In the years since then, the membership of Parliament has changed. We went through a period where we saw lots of ambitious young people coming in because they saw the European Parliament as the first step on the ladder to a career in national politics. Our Deputy Prime Minister is one of those, as is our Secretary of State for Climate Change. But increasingly you've seen, and in 2009 you saw the achievement of critical mass, more than 50% of the members. People who've chosen to go to the European Parliament because they actually want to make a career in politics at European level. They think it's more interesting or more varied or whatever than national politics. And the change in the collective psyche of the European Parliament as a result of this has been striking. You have members of the European Parliament who are no longer there because they believe that the European Commission and the President of the European Commission should be leading forward the drive for European integration. They see the European Commission as a civil service, pure and simple. They are people who are there because they believe the European Parliament itself should be a leading institution, and that together with the Council of Ministers, which they see as the major interlocutor, we have to get this European Union together. And the big row that's been going on this week over next year's budget, but in reality about the multi-annual financial framework, which will take us through the 5 years from 2012, that row is all about, well, it's a tussle for power between the European Parliament and the Council of Ministers, the two arms of the budgetary authority, the two legislative arms of the European Union, about how fast we can drive forward the European Union and which institutions are going to take the lead. And these are the kind of developments you can see. I could talk to you until the cows come home about many other things, but I hope you'll actually read the book or get it from your university library and see. But I'd be more than happy to answer any questions later on.
Thanks a lot. And I guess now Professor Banducci and Professor Varelli will give a few